At the end of Angels in America, Part 1, I remember hearing that all the questions raised in that 3.5-hour show would be answered in Part 2, another 3.5-hour show. But what questions? The meaning of life? Why are people so cruel to each other? Where did AIDS come from and when is it going away? Well, now that I've seen Part 2, no answers to those questions, but like a good soap opera, I did learn a lot about the characters' relationships and sex lives. Lessons on sex extend even to the angel in the play, who has, among other things, an uncanny ability to induce people to orgasm. Now, what that has to do with the play, I'm not really sure. In fact, there's so much said and so much going on at breakneck speed that it's all dizzying.
You're Roy's nurse. I recognize you.
No, you don't.
From the hospital. You are Roy Cohn's nurse.
No, not a nurse. Not a nurse. We all look alike to you. You all look alike to us. It's a mad, mad world. Have a nice day.
Still, like Part 1, Perestroika is a massive effort that is performed flawlessly. All the characters from Part 1 are back and they are once again put through their paces. The villainous Roy Cohn is now in a hospital dying of AIDS. The two gay boyfriends, separated after one is diagnosed with AIDS, now go their separate ways. And the closeted gay husband is opening the door on homosexuality while his mentally unstable wife hallucinates herself into enlightenment. In between, we're introduced to a variety of bizarre characters, including a council of angels, the ghost of Ethel Rosenberg, and the world's oldest Bolshevik, to name just a few. Playwright Tony Kushner laces the piece with some very funny lines, including a nasty reference about former Mayor Ed Koch. But the humor seemed to undercut the play's deepest meanings. Every time we get close to understanding something, the characters make fun of themselves, and the impact is lost.
Are you a homosexual?
Oh, is it that obvious? Yes, I am. What's it to you?
Would you say you were a typical homosexual?
Me? Oh, I'm stereotypical. What? You mean like, am I a hairdresser?
Are you a hairdresser?
Well, it would be your lucky day if I was.
Strangely, my favorite performer from Part 1 became my least favorite in Part 2. Ron Liebman's Roy Cohn, who struck a high note the first time around, becomes Johnny One Note now. Spewing and spitting and sputtering every line, you realize a little Roy Cohn goes a long way.
Jews in college, historical liberal coalition, right? My people being the first to sell retail to your people. Your people being the first people my people could afford to hire to sweep out the stores Saturday mornings. And then we all held hands and rode the bus to Selma. Not me, of course. I don't ride buses. I take cabs.
Stephen Spinella, the man dying of AIDS, delivers a beautifully touching performance, and Jeffrey Wright is terrifically deadpan as a hospital nurse. Kathleen Chalfant once again does her quick change routine, playing a handful of characters, female as well as male. I really wanted to like Perestroika. I applaud its politics, but with so much distracting mumbo-jumbo going on, I just couldn't buy it. Like an overzealous salesman, it talked itself right out of a sale. Its heart is in the right place, even if its mouth keeps getting in the way. I'm Roma Torre, and that's a wrap for NY1. If you've never experienced a Spalding Gray show, now's as good a time as any to get acquainted. Gray's Anatomy is the latest of 14 monologues or storytelling sessions, and all you really get is a guy sitting at a table on an otherwise empty stage just talking. Now, I generally have a hard time with monologues, even when they're dramatized with a set and costumes. But this, nothing happens, nothing even moves, and yet if anyone can make something out of nothing, it's Spalding Gray. So there he is, empty stage, table, trademark plaid shirt, just talking about whatever. But Gray has this uncanny ability to take the ordinary situations in life and make them extraordinarily amusing. In this case, reaching the age of 50, he's discovered a blurring of vision in his left eye. So he embarks on a bizarre adventure attempting to repair his eye. He sees a doctor, a Christian Scientist practitioner, a nutritionist, and those are the more normal folk. Eventually, he recounts his visits to a healer from Bali and a psychic surgeon in the Philippines. But before all that, what does a semi-famous New York storyteller do when he has an eye problem? He consults his therapist.
So I went to my therapist to talk with him about the situation. Now, my therapist was a graduate of Auschwitz, so he was an existential realist. And I come in and he goes, I start talking about it, he goes, Spalding, Spalding, please, please, please. All things are contingent and there is also chaos. In other words, happens. Please, give up with the causes and thinking about the causes and the causes and the this and the that and the airy-fairy magical thinking and the Disneyland Tinkerbell la, please. Do the right thing, get the operation. He was no help.
Spalding Gray may remind you of a Gentile Woody Allen, a bit of a hypochondriac, self-absorbed, and terribly funny. His work may appear slight, but it is the purest form of theater alive. A stage, an actor talking, and a good story. I'll take that over a falling chandelier any day. I'm Roma Torre, and that's a wrap for NY1. We've all grown accustomed to My Fair Lady. Ever since its Broadway debut in 1956, the Lerner and Loewe musical has been a staple of the American theater, just as Rex Harrison became synonymous with Henry Higgins. Well, now it's Richard Chamberlain's turn to tackle the role, and while he's no Rex Harrison, I can say, by Jove, I think he's got it. Melissa Errico has got it too. As Eliza Doolittle, she's as loverly to look at as she is to listen to, and she handles the comedy with grace and timing. The story, just to remind you, surrounds the relationship between a Cockney flower girl and an upper-class linguist who takes on the challenge of turning her into a lady. Chamberlain makes for an energetic Higgins, not nearly the curmudgeon that Harrison portrayed, and a big difference. Chamberlain can sing, and quite well too. And despite his 58 years, Chamberlain has maintained his youthful leading man looks, and so the underlying romance between the two makes a lot more sense in this version. This show has an added bonus, the inclusion of Julian Holloway as Eliza's father, Alfred Doolittle. If you ever saw the original version or the movie, you might remember Julian's father, Stanley Holloway, in the same role. The lad's a spitting image of his dear old dad and a treat to watch. Paxton Whitehead as Colonel Pickering, Higgins' colleague and conscience, does his usual best. And a special mention goes to the sets. Based on the original designs of Ralph Coltai, his multi-tiered sets are not only appealing to the eye, they also serve as symbolic reminders of Britain's rigid class structure, a theme of this Pygmalion story that often gets lost in the music. And speaking of the music, you've probably heard it 1,000 times, but this Lerner and Loewe score is so gorgeous it can stand repeating, at least with this company. I must be honest, My Fair Lady was not on my top 10 list of Broadway shows to see. Its score is so familiar, it's practically a cliche. And so I feared seeing a tired old lady on stage. Instead, what I found was an entertaining, if uninspired, old friend. I'm Roma Torre, and that's a wrap for NY1. The Red Shoes has a number of missteps, among them opening the show with a scene from Swan Lake featuring the great music of Tchaikovsky. Compared to that, the musical's original tunes fall far short. Also, the play ends with a ballet version of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, The Red Shoes. That classic story only points up the glaring flaws in the musical's own dull book. But The Red Shoes does shine visually, and if you close your ears, it's a stunning treat. The dancing in the show is superb, and if they'd left it as a ballet, I'd probably be giving the show a rave. Margaret Illman as the beautiful ballerina Victoria Page is a wonder to behold. This principal ballerina with the National Ballet of Canada in real life could easily hold the show on her own. The Red Shoes is actually two shows in one, a lovely dance concert that soars, and a dreadfully standard musical that is utterly earthbound. That half of the show features mediocre acting, forgettable tunes, and some of the corniest writing this side of Kansas. I do make the exception of George de la Peña as Luboff, the dance master. He's a triple threat, equally accomplished as a dancer, singer, and actor. The story, as in the movie, involves the grand ambition of a young ballerina who equates dance with life itself. She catches the eye of an exacting impresario, Boris Lermontov, who runs a ballet company, and quickly becomes its star. She falls in love with a struggling young composer, and at the end is tragically torn between her love of dance and her young lover. I find it hard to understand how the Red Shoes got so flat-footed, considering the talents involved. Julie Stein's songs hit sour notes, though his ballet compositions are quite lovely. Marcia Norman's book is utterly lifeless, ranging from dull to deadly, and Steve Barton as Lermontov behaves like a priggish James Mason with a hemorrhoid problem, though he sings majestically.
She puts on the enchanted shoes, and she dances like no one has ever seen before.
Besides the dancing, I have only praise for the technical designs. Heidi Landesman's gorgeous painted sets and Catherine Zuber's classy costumes suggest a much grander production than the rest of the staff delivers. Choreographer Lar Lubavitch is as much a star of the Red Shoes as its lead performers, in fact, more so. His closing ballet suggests what could have been a stylish and haunting production. Instead, what we mostly got was standard Broadway fare with music and story that simply fails to sing. I'm Roma Torre, and that's a wrap for New York 1.